This month's video is a big Justice League feature. I'll be filling a request I received way back on my first video showcasing the creation of STAS Flash. Link up top. The comment was from user Mythos75 and they asked if they could see me make Hal Jordan's brief appearance in the JLU episode The Once and Future Thing Part 2. Well, the time has come as that episode reaches its 20th anniversary tomorrow. Plus, as a bonus, we'll look at how you can improve all your core Justice League members by adding accurate cell shading to them. Let's get started. Hal's recipe is another that was born out of making the best from leftover parts. I was originally thinking of using a full Deathstroke torso for him until I realized that Hal and John weren't drawn that big. You see, I used a Deathstroke torso for my Green Arrow custom, link up there, and Ollie was drawn so much bigger than the Lanterns, so Hal had to follow in line with that idea since he was a similar size to Stewart. I had a spare Gods and Monsters Superman torso available and I figured I could bulk that up a bit to work. I'm keeping Deathstroke's arms though, as they match Hal's thinner look compared to John's thicker forearms. For the legs, again leftover, but I thought Batcycle Batman's taller, thin legs would match the larger scale of the Justice League line and then will help offset the shorter height of the Superman torso. Another little detail is swapping out Slade's tiny hands for bigger ones. There are a ton of characters that have come with fists in this line, and BTAS Batman's will work quite nicely. Now onto his head. Who could work for this face shape? Going through the DCC line, I see a few possibilities. BTAS Robin, Ra's al Ghul, STAS Superman, and wouldn't you know it, Gods and Monsters Batman or Kirk's head. Let's pull those out and compare the sizes to see who would work best. Robin is too round. Ra's has a surprisingly short face. Superman seems too recognizable. So that leaves Gods and Monsters Langstrom heads. I was thinking the masked eyes would help for Hal, but settled on Kirk's unmasked portrait because of the already sculpted ears. Okay, the recipe is set, so let's start Dremeling. I'll start by cutting Slade's gloves and Batman's boots down so that they're both straight across the way Hal's are. To do this, heat up all four parts, remove them, and then use your disc Dremel to flatten them down evenly. Pop them back on and they should be good. One more thing to heat up is the surprise ability to simply remove Batman's belt instead of Dremeling it off. Set that piece aside for future use. I'm thinking either over Mr. Freeze's shoulder or around Harley's waist. The next thing to Dremel will be the head. Kirk's mullet needs to go. Hal has the minor beginnings of one, but it curves out instead of goes down. We also need to take down the height of his hair, change his overall hairline, and remove his eyebrows. Lastly, we'll take away his wrist and armbands and reduce the collar down a bit. Sand all these areas down smoothly and you'll be ready to add some epoxy sculpt onto him where needed. We'll start by covering the 3 holes left in his torso from where Superman's coat was attached. Similarly, move down to where his belt was and fill that in evenly. Sand over the chest coverings and we can start bulking him up. I'll straighten out his chest and then bring out the definition on the sides toward his arms. Come down to his gloves and cover the small gaps where we trimmed them off to straighten those out just a little bit better on the backs. Back up to the chest and we'll add another layer of bulk to get him closer to John Stewart's size. While that dries, we can start on his mask. Roll out a tiny amount of mixed epoxy and start to form the bottom of his mask on both sides. One more layer on the chest and then add some height to his traps to match the reference. Back up to his mask and we can add the top portion and blend it into the bottom. Now I'm trying a new technique with the eye whites of the mask here. I'm choosing to form around them and then go back and fill them in separately and sand them over. I'm undecided if it's better than denting in the eye holes, but it's a decent first attempt and worth trying again on the next mask. Another small revision that needs to happen is extending his collar up from Superman's. Collars always require far less epoxy than you'd expect, and I've recently come across a better way to blend epoxy in. Thanks to the incredible YouTube channel user Ibrahim Mustafa, I'm using the simple technique of a drop of water or two to blend epoxy down smoother than I ever have before, and it results in less sanding. There's probably no way you know about me and not him, but go check out his amazing channel if you haven't seen his work. Link is in the description. Anyway, back up to the head. It's time to work on his hair. Hal has shorter and a little wider hair than Kirk did, so we'll want to sculpt on the sides and add some sideburns, and then start to add the spit curl transition. For the curl itself and the curved up mullet, I'm going to use green stuff because it has the ability to be a little more flexible based on what ratio you mix. Roll some up and shape it into your curl and blend it in with some more water. There are only a few major things left to sculpt on him now: his color division lines and chest emblem. Those two are of mild debate among fans, but since sculpting those lines is how DCC made most of their figures, I'm choosing to continue that aesthetic here too. Roll extremely thin epoxy and lay it down in the curved shapes where his green divides from the black, front and back. For his emblem, start with a circle, let it dry, Dremel and sand it down, then add the lantern shape. Dremel and sand the piping lines and the emblem down, and he's ready to paint now. Hal's palette is only 5 colors: black, green, white, peach, and brown. You can also add 2 more colors for his cel shading if you choose to go that route. I'll do the brighter green since it's a significant look, but I think I'll leave out the gray highlights on his black body. When applying cel shading, you want to paint on your lighter color first in the general area that it will go, and then define the exact shape with your darker color, since darks cover lights easier. It might take a couple of passes, but you'll get there. I went with this green for his highlights at first, but ended up going brighter once I had it on compared next to the shadow color. For the darker shadow green, I mixed these 2 greens together. Next, the bodysuit is all black and he has white gloves and the classic white and green chest emblem. His head needs the skin color, brown hair, white eyes, black mask, and small green shine on his nose. Careful on the details and do any cleanup and he's all done. He's one of my more obscure choices for a custom, but he's a classic comics character and it's always great to build up your lantern core. From one bit of cel shading to the next, let's paint up our core Justice League characters with some more show-accurate looks. Shading my team all started with Batman. You see, much like his BTAS appearance, the colored portion on the black parts of his suit really do define the character in my memory. DC Collectibles' first version of BTAS Batman didn't have his blue highlights, but they corrected that with the Adventures Continue release of the figure. I like that first figure, but his second release is easily my favorite one from the whole line. The blue just looks and feels so much more right. With that idea in mind, we turn to the Justice League figure. Again, the purplish blue coloring from the show is so integral to his look that I had to see what it looked like. I mention it being purplish, but that's really only in the first couple of seasons. It eventually went much more blue, so I chose blue this time with the idea of doing a first season purple one later. Cel shading a custom figure is a little different than shading a produced, officially released one. For the custom, you can lay down your lighter color more generally, as we saw earlier with Hal, and then cover it with your darker color. For Batman here, and the rest of the league, we'll want to be much more careful and precise putting the lighter color down and then relying on very careful scraping for cleanup. He needs the color on the top of his head, around the shoulders of his cape, on his gloves, underwear, and boots. Clean up any mistakes with your knife and then set aside 30 minutes to stare at how awesome he looks now. The Jon Stewart figure has his own scaling and sculpting issues that will require a full makeover video in the style of my Condiment King video, linked above if you want to see that, but for now I'll show you the shading I did for him on the standard figure's body. Much like Batman, he just needs a lighter color around his shoulders and then some on his gloves and boots. I mixed my green, but you may find a light green that works for you. I've also added some DCC Icons accessories for Jon, and I have a few neat options for his hands. I should be able to use all of them across future Green Lantern Corps members. Jon needed this light blue around his cape, underwear, and boots. Then, a surprise to me, but once I saw it, I knew it would make him look just right. He has a black inner cape on the show, and a couple coats later he looks really sharp. For a fun accessory, I sculpted up a tiny Oreo that he can hold too. Superman is a little similar to Jon in that he needs his inner cape and underwear painted with this red color. I used the same color for both, but the underwear needs the inverse of what we've been doing. I chose to use the red they gave him as a lighter shade and then painted the rest of the underwear for the darker look. He also needs a touch of light gray in his hair for his earlier seasons look. I even traced those controversial cheekbones of his with a super handy fine point marker. I'm going to have a JLU Superman or two floating around, so those two guys will be made without the age details. Hawkgirl needed 2 colors and an all-important mace. I gave her the tan stripe on her head, and then chose to paint her green pants black on the front and back to mimic the side and inner thigh highlights of green they gave her. For the mace, it's actually an 80s TMNT splinter accessory glued onto a part from a DCC stand topped with epoxy and a tiny little price tag plastic piece painted brown. This one even has some UV painted white electricity made out of hot glue on the ball too. Wally only has these few tiny picks of a light yellow on his earpiece bolts and belt, and then a nice standard shine down each boot. Diana gets that same yellow on her crown and chest, and then a light gray on her bracers. You can finish her up with some more of that black we gave Shaira down on her waist, but be sure to leave some blue showing on the sides. Oh, and don't forget her lasso. I found this lovely spool of plastic thread, and the yellow in it works wonders. The final figure is Aquaman. He gets light yellow on his hair, goatee, and belt, and then a mixed turquoise-ish color running down the front and back of his legs. As with all those leg and boot shines, be sure to give nice subtle waves to them to make them look a little more natural and form-fitting. That's everybody. Again, I know this can be a controversial topic, painting the cel shading on the figures, but I feel that when it's done right, it really makes them look like they've jumped right off the screen. I keep it to shiny objects and clothes that have significantly different colors to them. Just stay away from shading skin and you'll be better off. Anyway, that's today's Justice League centered video. I hope you like seeing how you can improve your current figures and make an additional Green Lantern no matter how small his appearance was on the show. Thanks for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more monthly content like this and occasional shorts featuring tips or additional customs. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see more customs like these and all my latest work. Next month's video turns to Metropolis to honor the Man of Steel's finale turning 25 years old. I'll be making 2 brand new Superman variants for this, so you won't want to miss it. Check out the rest of my catalog of videos while you wait for that next one. Have a good one, and happy customizing!